everyone. Welcome to ETHStaker Community Call 12.
I think 12.
Today is, yes, good. Today is December 11th, 2020. I'm here with the ETHStaker crew and our friend Lakshman Sangar, who is a Ethereum Foundation researcher. I'm going to get us started today by making some introductions, and we'll go from there. I've also invited Jeremiah as a co-host because he's always good for the giggles.
Hey man, thanks for having me on. I know I popped in 10 seconds ago. I was like itching my belly with the video camera. I'm like, oh crap, we're going live. It's happening right now.
So let me start with the ETHStakers, and then we'll go from there. I am SuperFizz. My friends call me Hank, and I am an organizer for the ETHStaker community, and it's just been a passion of mine. Unvetica is Michael, and he does a lot with our presentation and logistics, and we're very appreciative. Patricio Worthhalter is the man behind POAP. Everyone will receive a POAP for attending or viewing this live call that you can claim within the next hour. Lamboshi is our deep thinker. He understands the things that none of us can figure out. And Buddha is our resident link to the beacon chain. He works for Bitfly and is a representative of beaconcha.in. We also have with us today Jeremiah Nickel, who you know as JT Nickel on eFinance. He is just, we're kindred spirits in fostering a friendly and welcoming community. So we get along with him great. And our exciting guest today is Lakshman Sangar. And I have had a lot of thoughts brewing lately about, if you've watched any of my daily State of the Stake videos, like and subscribe.
Ring the bell, smash the like button.
You know that I spend a lot of time talking about the need for trustless and decentralized staking pools and the reality that those cannot exist yet. And so when I saw Lakshman's article last week talking about what needs to be done to bring those to fruition, I was all over it, and I reached out to Lakshman and asked if he would share his time with us. So Lakshman, will you begin just kind of by telling us who you are and what's up?
Yeah, sure. Hi everyone, I'm Lakshman. I work at the Ethereum Foundation on a lot of things related to ETH2. So a mix of like ecosystem development, which is sort of figuring out what projects to support, as well as research. Recently been thinking a lot about the ETH1, ETH2 merge, which is going to be pretty interesting. But also trying to make more of a habit of kind of sharing thoughts about things that are happening in the research world. And recently wrote a post kind of because I had observed there's a good amount of confusion around like staking pools, like which ones are decentralized, why are some launched and some aren't, and wanted to kind of clear that up a little bit in a post. I don't know if it's been linked somewhere, but the basic, I figure maybe a better way to talk about this is maybe let people ask questions. But the high level is that if a staking pool is live today, it's probably not actually decentralized when you try to withdraw from it, because you'll need to trust that whoever's operating the staking pool, that their validator will send you the right amount of money later on. But there is a change in progress. Actually, there was just a pull request on the spec repository like just a few minutes ago that should make it possible for like real decentralized staking pools to exist. And a number of the projects for that reason who operate staking pools are kind of waiting to do their launch until that's actually possible. So I can talk more about kind of the specifics of how all that works, or I can just answer questions depending on what people think is appropriate.
So I've got a
Yeah, what's
I could maybe kind of kick this off, and you sort of touched on this a little bit already, Lakshman, and I had given your article a read over last night with Superfizz, and I think what struck me is I sort of have one foot in the...
Someone is reporting that the YouTube stream is not working.
Oh, hang on.
So while he's working on that, let
I
me
think
hop
we.
in and say,
Sorry, I think we should be good now. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I was just going to elaborate on what Lakshman said. Just before we went live for this call, so Lakshman's article discusses the need for this kind of ETH1 withdrawal credential. And at about 2 minutes before the top of this hour, Danny Ryan submitted a pull request to the Ethereum 2.0 specs to include the very thing that we're talking about today. So one of ETHStaker's goals has been to push this, and it looks like we're making some progress. But Michael, why don't you go ahead and say what you were going to say?
Yeah, I was just going to kind of use a loose car analogy here to ultimately circle back around to my question here, and that is, if I'm shopping for a vehicle and by nature of looking at sort of the 2020 models, I can naturally assume that it's going to have automatic windows, it's going to have cruise control, and it's going to have, you know, the sort of standard luxuries that we all know and love. Likewise, if I'm sort of kicking the figurative tires and comparing ETH1 to ETH2, by the very nature of me interacting with a staking pool service, I'm assuming that it's going to have certain features, one of those being that when I withdraw those rewards, I don't have to trust the company. It's just happening because it's on a smart contract. But reading your article, that isn't necessarily the case. So can we maybe break that down a little bit more as to why that isn't, but and then we can kind of transition into why this Git addition is important?
Sure. So just kind of stepping back a little bit, if kind of maybe something we're all sort of hoping for, like if ETH2 is successful, what actually happens is the ETH1 and the ETH2 state merge at some later point in time, basically. So this is what people have talked about as like phase 1.5. There are other names for it, the merge and some other names, but the idea is that if you can, and when you deposit into the deposit contract in ETH1 today, you specify an ETH2 address that you can withdraw to. And that's fine. So you can basically now withdraw to a validator that exists in ETH2. But the change that's being kind of proposed to be made is to also be able to specify an ETH1 address to withdraw to. And what's cool about that is you can write a smart contract today that would be the contract that gets that withdrawal if the merge happens. And so then therefore you as a user could see that this contract exists and disperses the funds appropriately rather than having to trust the validator to do it for you. So that's sort of the distinction between the two withdrawal methods.
Absolutely. No, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a little trippy to think about because it's sort of like a commitment, like the change in the spec is sort of like a community commitment that we will honor this ETH1 withdrawal address in the future. But it means that, like, you know, staking pools today can write smart contracts that you know, disperse those funds, then specify those smart contracts as the right ETH1 addresses to withdraw to in the future.
Awesome.
That was the sound of a nice swallow there, man. Good gosh. Thanks for sharing all that. And by the way, is there like 65 people in this Zoom right now? This is great.
This is crazy.
Also, we forgot to mention Patricio's working hard on sending POAP links. So
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm halfway there. I sent 40.
And so we're also live streaming this to YouTube. Do we have a YouTube, a collection strategy for people on YouTube?
Join the Zoom.
We don't.
Join
They
the
have
Zoom.
to join the
Okay,
Zoom.
no
Yeah,
problem.
and the Zoom link is on our Discord. And I'm going to make a pause on sending the POAPs because there's something I want to ask Lakshman. So I've been superficially following the withdrawal methods on the R&D Discord, and I saw some intense debate between different interested parties, staking pools, researchers, implementers, and others. And I couldn't exactly understand what are the trade-offs we are making. I'm sure we are making trade-offs because there were lengthy discussions, and I've been in Ethereum since 2015. And although I don't know deeply what the things meant, I know when something smelled like a trade-off. So
Sure.
could you go over what are these trade-offs that are making? What are we missing from this implementation? What could we have not missed if we took more time?
I see. So on that latter point, I mean, this is always up for debate, but it wasn't always clear that like Ethereum 2 would merge with ETH1 the way that, you know, we're all kind of planning today. And so it wasn't always obvious that you want to specify an ETH1 address for withdrawal. So that's that point. To talk about the debate going on in the research Discord. As I understand it right now, there are two different proposals for how you could do this. Ultimately, both proposals are a way to specify an ETH1 address that's associated with a deposit. One would be to do what I was saying, which is basically at deposit time, specify in the deposit contract that this ETH1 address is where you would withdraw to. And then another way is to have like a separate contract that has like, is sort of like enshrined and agree on as like the registry of like ETH2 to ETH1 address mapping. And, you know, like I think the trade-offs there are sort of, I mean, I'm a little biased because I sort of the former seems like cleaner to me, but and the main reason being that you have to add like another contract that is sort of like a special contract. But I think there are probably some advantages in like, you know, like it is splitting out the complexity in a sense, you know, like it's less functionality just in the deposit, that just the deposit contract is sort of like, I mean, the deposit contract doesn't need to change obviously, but less functionality that we need to look at the deposit contract too. It's like a little bit more modular. Ultimately, which of these two methods kind of ends up being chosen, it doesn't change the underlying functionality, which is being able to commit to an ETH1 address for a deposit in some way.
That's cool.
Oh, and I should say one other kind of point is like there's a broader space for what this commitment can enable. So like we're talking just about staking pools, but another whole set of things is like if you can specify an ETH1 address for your deposit, well, you can also, you know, as a single user who's just depositing 32 ETH, you can specify like a smart contract wallet or something. Like any smart contract you can specify as the thing that can eventually withdraw it. And so there's probably a bunch of other interesting use cases that can kind of come out of doing this that way that are not just staking pool oriented.
I would like to jump in because to me, the obvious use is staking pools. And I know that there are other uses, but I'm having trouble imagining what they might be. Can you predict for us what other uses besides staking pools? It's difficult to predict things about the future, isn't it?
Yeah, of course. But it's also fun. I mean, like, let's say maybe you're like a large custodian. So like maybe not like a staking pool, but more like a bank or exchange or something like that. And you want to kind of like prove to your like retail users like what the funds will ultimately be used for. So kind of like similar to the staking pool, but like, you know, like less decentralized in a sense. But like basically it's like you're like, okay, you want to create some sort of like create some trustless disbursement mechanism for your user. You could use this to do that. For the individual, Like maybe you just don't want to operate or you don't want to like I have to think about that a little bit more. Maybe as we talk, I'll think of something good. But yeah, it's interesting. It's like a new space for design, but it's not super obvious exactly what you would do.
He wakes up in a cold sweat at 3 a.m. I got the idea.
Well,
I got it.
That's funny. When I first read about Ethereum smart contracts, I'm like, I know that this is really, really interesting, and I have absolutely no idea what it will do. So yeah, this definitely opens up a lot of possibilities, but it will take time for them to become more obvious.
Is it?
Here's another thing. You could like, let's say you have a hardware wallet with ETH1 address on it. You could specify that as a withdrawal address, and then in some way it's like your hardware wallet's kind of securing your ETH on ETH2, because like if the ETH1 ETH2 merge happens, this hardware wallet is the one that gets the coins.
Okay, well I got
so you could kind of like.
I don't like that you keep saying if the merge happens.
yeah. I try to be diplomatic, but like I realize these are the people with whom I can be like.
If you're being diplomatic, what is the other? Who's the counterparty to that diplomacy?
Yeah, it's no one here. That's for sure.
Okay, then my actual question: if we're assigning a ETH1 address on the beacon chain, is there a possibility that users could actually withdraw from the beacon chain back to their ETH1 address before the merge happens?
Oh, no.
No?
No.
Even if we had some sort of a mechanism to burn the ETH on the beacon chain?
This was like a pretty, I mean, there's like a lot of discussion around this, much of it before my time. The decision to keep ETH1 and ETH2, like that bridge one way, was like pretty deliberate, kind of like to keep the two ecosystems kind of operating independently. So one, like big changes in one wouldn't kind of like really screw over the other, or, in either direction, at least until the merge happens.
Okay.
So that's, yeah. I mean, there's some good resources, and I saw someone message on chat. Yeah, what's with the ETH? I just for a disclaimer, I'm working on this like full time, so I definitely am not on the ETH side, but I'm just like used to saying it because I talk to lots of like skeptical people all the time. But I'll try to stop.
I have an aesthetics question, something that I just haven't figured out. What is the purpose of the address prefix, the OX01? Why not something arbitrary?
Oh, why not something arbitrary?
Yeah. Like I don't get where the OX01 fits into the big idea of things and why it is a standard prefix.
Oh, I mean, it's just like the one for ETH2 signatures is OX00. And so this is the next one. It's just it's 1 byte, and it's like, okay, next number. Okay. There may be new withdrawal prefixes for new withdrawal types that haven't been conceived of. The way it was designed was to allow for that kind of specification of new types if necessary.
Okay, so OX00 is BLS public key, and OX01 is ETH1 address. Okay, that makes sense.
Exactly.
Well, I have another question, but before, if anyone didn't get your POAP, for example, because you joined late, just message me either on the Zoom chat and on Discord, and I will deliver. So Lakshman, you mentioned that only recently we could make this decision because we were lacking clarity on how ETH1 was going to merge with ETH2, and for years we've been discussing, or we've been observing those conversations, and I kind of missed when this decision was made, because I remember a couple of months ago there was a still intense debate between making a shard of Ethereum 1 and doing like some sort of full-blown migration. someone else proposed to do a voluntary migration where you would just have some sort of stateless client on ETH2 and people would decide to move their assets to another shard. So all this mess, it seems that has settled, and I'm not completely aware. So what's the current status? How is the merge going to look like on a superficial, because we could talk a lot about the merge, but superficially, what are the main points about how the merge is going to be?
Yeah, it's so right now there are a few different work streams going on in parallel, and then there's like something going on externally that we're also kind of trying to keep an eye on. So the three things in parallel are like clients, phase one, which is shards, and the merge. And as of now, it doesn't seem like, as of what I understand, I don't think there are necessarily dependencies. So it's a function of like what gets there first and like what based on like how work progresses, what we all kind of feel is like the right ordering to do these things in. So there is some unknown there in that, like and hence there's been discussion about a merge without shards and a merge with shards. The truth is it could go either way. I think it kind of depends on timelines. And then the other thing is, like, there's obviously, the stuff isn't happening completely in a vacuum. There's all the stuff happening at the application layer. There's all of DeFi, there's rollups, right? And if rollups end up becoming, or layer 2 in general ends up becoming like a really important piece of the whole infrastructure puzzle, then, like there may be decisions that, kind of want to accommodate that reality, if that makes sense. So that was a kind of rambling way to not really answer your question, but just to say that there's these things happening in parallel, and it could kind of happen in different orders depending on, like how work progresses, how the world changes around us.
I can never remember lists after I've said them. Sorry, will you repeat those three things? I'm sorry, Patricio.
Oh, it's kind of like the light client support, shards, like phase 1, and the merge.
Okay,
I do think that the answer was quite clear. If you've been on Ethereum long enough, this is a common pattern. This is how we've done almost everything. There are so many unknowns, and it's so hard to predict how the network is going to be used. But this is one of the few things we learned. We learned that premature optimization or premature decision making, it's likely going to be a big regret. So instead of rushing making decisions based on the assumptions we know now, we allow ourselves to wait longer and to work on different stuff until there's better clarity about how pieces are going to fall. And the L2 rollups or different scaling designs, it's something I know very well. And I think it would be a big mistake to make ETH2 fundamental decisions in a context where we don't have the least idea about how this is going to play out. And it's very likely that it's going to play out in a way that no one has envisioned. So it's good to hear and to learn that we are just in a holding pattern until there's very clarity about how the network needs to look like.
I mean, there's sort of like a sort of implicit design principle, which is to kind of prefer optionality when designing parts of these systems. So for example, if the merge happens first, maybe we want to design it in such a way that, if it makes sense, like it can be separated into, like ETH1 can be separated into a shard if necessary, right? And so you might want to like design things in a certain way so that's possible. So it's there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of unknowns. Ultimately, that's a good thing because it means that people are using Ethereum and people are building in the ecosystem. So it's really it's kind of a blessing.
Yeah. So I have a particular opinion. I don't know if it's unpopular. It looks unpopular, but I would be very happy if all scaling initiatives around ETH2 get halted, and all the ETH2 research is only focused on base consensus and shutting down proof of work and not doing anything else. I think the size of the blocks right now and the size of the blocks in the Bitcoin chain and the capacity we have on the network is likely enough for the next adoption cycle. Maybe it's not enough for global scale, but it seems enough for what we need, what DeFi needs, what the enterprises are trying to test. So I kind of like this idea that you're not working so hard on something that may not get any adoption.
Did you say that you feel like we have enough capacity on ETH1 right now for the current adoption cycle?
I know it's unpopular, but yes, I believe so, and I'm going to argue about that.
It's okay to have unpopular opinions. I just wanted to ensure that I understood your perspective. Like, it's okay. I just, I mean, we disagree, but I just wasn't aware that was your perspective.
Well, I mean, if rollups get massive adoption and all the DeFi goes to rollups, he could be right.
I think without rollups, we still have enough capacity for the experiments we are running.
Oh.
And I know experiments because I can't really understand deep technical subjects like the complexity between migration ETH1 to ETH2 and such. But I do understand dApps. I know what dApps needs. I know what dApp developers need. I've been a dApp developer for years. And nobody currently wants to use Ethereum and is outbid because there's not enough capacity or anything. We had a gas price surge for different reasons that we could analyze in a different context. But right now, there's no team that wants to do something and says, we can't do this because the network is too congested or anything. And there are so many unknowns that trying to solve the problem that the current developers have or their wishes can really be detrimental for the future of the network, because it can happen, and it would probably happen, that if you come up with a solution for the current problems you have, then you have built lots of technical depth for the next generation of problems.
Yeah, so I get the need to wait and structure it properly, but for you to, when you say that there's enough capacity on ETH1 as it is, like, for example, I collect these, what I call them internet stickers. And in order to claim these internet stickers on mainnet, it can sometimes be like $20 or $30. And I find network congestion to be a limiting factor for that dApp. So much so that it switched to an ETH2 solution, which for me is like a really strong indicator that there's not enough capacity on L1. And you may not even have ever heard of those. I don't know, but
I know a thing or two about those stickers, and I have a clear answer because I like to collect them. And you may not know this, but most of my stickers are on a different chain because I can't afford to have them on mainnet. I mean, I can't afford might not be the best word, but I don't know how to say it in English. But I don't think that it's reasonable that my sticker collection needs to be on a state level censorship resistant network compromise of 11,000 nodes distributed around the world. I don't feel that entitlement. If I get sick, I don't expect to get a treatment that maybe 1.0001% of the people in the world can get. And the ability to write on such a strong consensus engine on such a highly distributed database is not something that any collector sticker should be able to do. So that's what I think. We are doing fine on capacity. These experiments we are running, we are allowing ourselves to do things that couldn't happen at scale. But at the end of the day, the users should understand that there are different solutions for different needs. There are some therapies, if you get sick, that get maybe 10 or 100 times more expensive than the therapies most of the people get, just because of the limited resources that you can get on that the humanity knows how to produce. Like if you want to get some sort of scan that requires nuclear therapy, and building the isotope for you to get that image, it's something that takes a lot of energy. And there's no energy for every person that needs that therapy. So only the top of the pyramid are going to be able to afford the resources. And it's pretty much the same on DeFi, on the NFT space. Some users are always going to be outbid from the mainnet.
That's an interesting perspective. It's still not one I share, but it is an interesting perspective.
So
can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So let's assume that the bridge has been built between ETH1 and 2, and how will people that are not staking transfer the ETH to Ethereum 2? Do they have to do anything? And if they don't have to, why are people, or let's ask it this way, let's assume that the bridge has been built and we are on ETH2, everyone is on ETH2. How will staking on ETH2 look like? Is it still an interaction with with a smart contract, or do I have to sign a message from my wallet? Or is there a different
this is interesting. So if you exist in ETH1 within ETH2, unless you are staking, you might not even need to move into ETH2. You can stay in this like ETH1 kind of shell within ETH2. And I saw someone else ask about rollups earlier, and I'll kind of answer the question at the same time. It's like if you were using a rollup that related to ETH1, now you can use the rollup that's talking to ETH1 within ETH2, and it's just a faster rollup because your base layer is faster as well too now. So it may be the case that nothing really changes in just from the kind of like user experience, developer experience, unless you want to go stake. But it may not be the case that every single person who wants to be in whatever the Ethereum ecosystem is wants to go stake.
But how do I send a transaction from an Ethereum 1 address to an Ethereum 2 address if I never made the transition to Ethereum 2?
Oh, you'll still be able to deposit in some way.
Okay, so I have to deposit and then I can send a transaction on Ethereum 2. Okay.
Yeah, one of the nice things is the deposit will be, like right now there's a little bit more of a delay with deposits, and the deposit will be much, much faster because, within like a couple blocks or something, because it's like all happening in the same place. But yeah, ultimately, yeah, so like I think, if I remember, don't quote me on this, but I think it's like the ETH1 follow distance kind of like becomes a lot smaller. Yeah, that like you still will move into ETH2 in a similar way if you want to go stake, but you may not even need to.
Okay, and do I have to run, like, will there be a merge between Ethereum 2 and 1 clients as well, so that I only have to run one client? Or
yeah, so this is kind of like one of the challenging questions that I may not even be the best person to answer completely, but the hope is that there's sort of like this combined client that you run that uses like parts of Ethereum, what is an ETH1. So like, for example, we don't need to rewrite the whole EVM, or like maybe even the transaction kind of pooling mechanism, but then uses the ETH2 like end client for consensus. So you have this kind of joint thing that has an ETH1 piece and an ETH2 piece, and that's like the new client.
Is that something that an existing ETH2 client could do now? Basically take parts of something like Geth and incorporate just the necessary parts, so that and from my perspective, I come from the UI like simplicity for users.
Been done.
I'm sorry. I lost my connection.
Yeah, I'll find the link, but there's some good work being done by Guillaume from the Geth team and Mikhail from Consensus. But basically, they're working on a combined Teku Geth prototype client called Catalyst. That is exactly what we're talking about. So that's still in the sort of prototyping stage. But if current plans work out, then that's something that'll be the thing that you run, is this like combined thing.
That's a little bit interesting to me, and so I get that consensus having the bandwidth would be the organization to do that. But it's interesting to me that it's Teku-centric, because Teku tends to have more hardware overhead in general. So like they would be less likely to need an integrated client. But I am glad it's happening.
Yeah, I mean, like I think if it moves forward, you'll see something similar for all the clients. But it's just kind of where it's starting right now.
Sure.
Since you are our guest today, some people were asking on the Zoom chat about my perspective, but instead of me reinforcing my perspective, which I already presented, would you like to express your opinion on this appreciation that maybe we don't need to jump the gun on scaling design and we just rather wait and see how the ecosystem develops?
You mean jump the gun on like the ETH2 side or on the layer 2 side? Like the layer 1 or the layer 2?
I was thinking, I mean, you can express your opinion on any of the subjects. What the people was asking on the chat was what I think, but what I think I already said, and it was that we have enough capacity. Would you say that we have enough capacity?
Yeah, that's a really tough question. I mean, I think it's hard to look at, it's hard to look at what exists today and who the users are today and just say like, oh, these are the only possible users that could ever be a part of this ecosystem. It's like maybe when you have more capacity and it costs less to operate in Ethereum, there's a new class of users that use the same things. And I think that all of the scaling efforts sort of are pushing or kind of poking at that future. It's like, it may, I'm obviously very bullish, and I think that there's everyone in the world maybe could be using Ethereum in some way and someday, in which case, yeah, you need more capacity. You need other things going on. And so like, if we're thinking about that, yeah, I think that there's value in exploring all of these mechanisms. I think also they're not really competitive. Ideally they're all kind of like working together and making each other better. So it's like good to diversify and be trying things in layer 2 and layer 1 at the same time.
I like the answer because you seem to be disagreeing with me, but I know what I think and you don't. You don't disagree. This appreciation of what it's enough capacity, it's too subjective, and there's the strong partiality. That in
it's very hard to know.
I mean, and there's no way to measure what's enough. It's like sufficient decentralization by the Security and Exchange Commission. My point being, because now it feels like I'm a small blocker and maybe you're a big blocker, and that's not the case. I think that as long as upper layers can write commitments to the main chain every once in 1 hour, for example, that's pretty much enough capacity. And commitments are very tiny in storage. And well, someone is asking about transactions per second, but it's still too early to answer that. My vision is that we have like 1 megabyte blocks or even more, and they come once every 15 seconds and maybe even quicker when we have ETH2. And you can write plenty of hashes of commitments on such a capacity.
Yeah. I don't think anyone thinks that your perspective is wrong. I just it is a valid perspective that there's plenty of space for L2 and rollups to fit onto the existing chain. So I don't think anyone is disputing the facts. It's just a difference in perspective.
Just for the record, I don't think CK rollups or optimistic rollups or different sort of those same designs are the only way around the scalability solution. If I were to express what's going to be for me the most adopted scaling solution, I think it's going to be trust-based and not math-based or cryptographically secured.
Interesting.
Yeah, it could be that there is some fundamental limit to how far we can go with just math, but it also feels like maybe we haven't reached that point yet. So
let's say that you don't reach that limit, or you keep expanding it because of Moore's law and different pushing the boundary of computer science. It's so many important relationships in this world that are based on trust that I don't think that it's so important and imperious. It's so urgent to move them to crypto-based. If we just move the Supreme Court to crypto-based, like the Plasma people liked to say, we have made such a big leap ahead that we can keep relying on trust, everything local level and maybe a state level. But again, it's a very unpopular opinion.
You know, I'm sort of like, I think it's good to consider, like, in some sense, not to bring it to blockchains, but this is sort of like what the interoperable blockchain kind of approach is, like the Cosmos Polkadot thing, where it's like you have a bunch of small, like not like a bunch of smaller communes of blockchain activity that don't share their security completely. Commune is not the right word because it maybe has negative connotations. I think there's some credence to that version of the world as well. It's really hard to guess at exactly how things split out, but you know, one thing that is observable is that, like, you know, in the normal traditional world, we have like formed cities and we seem to like doing that. And so maybe there is room for something like what Ethereum could be, but
definitely. And I'm not familiar with the models of Cosmos or those other blockchains, but I would hope that if it's proven and validated that those are good models, I do hope that the Ethereum research team acquires that knowledge and makes it available on Ethereum.
Yeah, it's something to constantly think about for sure.
I'd like to kind of circle back to your conclusions in the article, because those are things that, you know, as the ETHStaker base, you know, I work with the ETHStaker base primarily on Reddit, and one of the frequent, you know, daily concerns is, when can I pool? Which exchange should I make my deposit to? And, you know, I have my set of recommendations that I've been spouting for weeks and weeks. Do you have recommendations regarding, and I'm not asking you to, definitely not asking you to cite any specific custodian, but recommendations regarding what people should do? Let's say that I am a user today and I have 4 Ether and I want to get involved. What would you suggest that person do?
Man, that's a tough question. Yeah, I don't want to like name anyone in particular, but I will say that right now it seems like the two obvious approaches to me, if I wanted to like stake some more ETH, would be to run my own validator, or to, you know, join a staking pool. And so if you're running your own validator, I mean, that choice comes down to, like, are you comfortable doing it? I think, right? Like, do you want to be a part of the journey? Like, do you enjoy doing this? And also, do you have 32 ETH to throw in? Because you know, understandably, maybe no one has like that on hand. And if you want to do so the thing about doing a staking pool is, and this was kind of the main thesis of the article. This was kind of like the big point I was trying to make, is any staking pool that exists today is probably not decentralized. You probably want to wait a little bit. Hello, sorry, my headphones just died.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, I thought it was me lagging out.
Yeah, no, yeah. So my, you know, it's hard to know exactly when things happen in this ecosystem, but early next year, we will see some staking pools that like do this properly. I will point to one example just because they had a blog post about it, and I want to kind of clear that up. I know Rocket Pool made an announcement that, you know, we're going to wait until this is ready, and so that's kind of what they're doing. And so like there are a few others who are making that decision responsibly. Yeah.
Can you help me one of the things that I anticipate, and it's one of the things that I run into when so staking pools approach me and they're like, hey, Superfizz, will you work with us to promote this? And I'm like, not really comfortable. What many of the things that they tell me are, well, we have some other kind of model that really is safe. Can you help me?
Yeah.
Because to me, I have not really. So I'll actually talk about blocks staking, and the blocks model is that they run the beacon chain client, and you have a remote signer. So you actually keep your keys locally, but you sign by connecting to a remote beacon chain. And the benefit there is that you don't have to run the hardware; you just have to run a desktop app. Aside from that model, is there any other model that you're aware of right now that that gives the trustless security that we're looking for?
Yeah, so I assume for blocks, I have, for the solution you're talking about, is that you're essentially running the validator, but like on this desktop app, and they're just running the beacon chain. Okay. Yeah, like if you're not running your validator right now, I would say it's probably not decentralized.
Okay.
I'll just come down and
yeah, and that's really the thing that I need. It's so important for me to help people understand that if they're not in control of their keys, then with this long 2-year wait, which is really 2 years in cryptocurrency is 20 years in the real world, things are going to change so rapidly that it's very likely that the coins you deposit in good faith now are not going to be available to you in 2 years. And the hypothetical scenario for this that we always see is you deposited with a pool and they did everything right and they were perfect, but some secret malicious hacker was able to access their withdrawal keys and they're faultless. It's not their fault, but somehow $58 million are gone and the pool is sorry, but you signed an agreement and your loss. And that's really the kind of thing that I'm so desperate to encourage people to, if you can solo stake now, by all means, please solo stake. If you have less than 32 Ether, things are moving very quickly right now for this kind of trustless decentralized staking. And you mentioned Rocket Pool, and I talk about Rocket Pool all day long. It's not that I'm obsessed with Rocket Pool. I think they do a great job, but at this moment, they are the only public pool who is really promoting this kind of solution and publicly saying, hey, we're going to wait until we're able to do this the right way rather than jumping in with something that may not work. So I just want to make sure that was out there in the public.
Does anyone, any guests out there want to unmute themselves, ask a question, or just put it into the chat?
As we do open mic, I want to talk a little bit about collaboration groups. And so ETHStaker has something called collaboration groups. It's where you sign up on a Google form and get connected to 4 other people who may be in a similar situation. Like maybe you know a little bit, maybe you know a lot, but it gives you a kind of working group of friends to bounce ideas off and learn from. And so if you're watching this and you're like, man, I wish I had someone I could talk to about this, you might sign up for our collaboration groups, and I'll try and put a link in our YouTube posting for this. But that's a great chance to just find your small home in the Ethereum community. So, yeah. Nolan, does everyone have permission to? Yeah, I am giving permission to unmute yourselves. So if you're observing and you have a question, please feel free. Did I do that wrong?
Nope, you're good.
Okay.
The question can be anything is true. It doesn't have to be specific about withdrawal methods. Whether you're running a validator and have a question, or you want to propose something else for us to cover, this is a good time for this. So we have 10 minutes left.
And will someone talk about, Michael, will you talk to us about what's happening on Monday?
Yes, so we actually have 2 ETHStaker calls. We have one in the morning, and I'm pulling up the details right now so I don't mess this up. We will be, for call 13, we have Monday, December 14th at 6 a.m. That is going to be Mountain Standard Time, so you have to do your own conversion on that one. We'll be talking with Sacha St. Ledger. What team is that on?
Nimbus.
And then we've got another call later that day at...
And so Nimbus it's an interesting call because they run on lightweight hardware. So if you're interested on staking on a Raspberry Pi, Nimbus runs on a fraction of the system resources that other staking clients run on. And we're going to learn more about them. I think that's, so 6 o'clock Mountain Time, but you can look on Reddit and find more about your local time there.
And then we've got another one at 4 p.m. Mountain Standard Time with David Rugendijk, and that is of Rocket Pool. And
so that is in many ways a follow-up to this call. Now that we are seeing movement in the direction of the potential for these smart contracts, we want to learn from Dave, not just how this applies to Rocket Pool, but how it applies to the trustless decentralized staking ecosystem in general. So that should be exciting.
With my rudimentary understanding, reading what Danny wrote about that PR in the description, it does seem like this is what Rocket Pool needs to continue. So it'll be interesting to talk to Dave about that and get his take on it. I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah, but doesn't that require the ETH1 hard fork first? The Berlin hard fork?
I'm not sure. I don't know.
Well, that's a great question for Lakshman, because my understanding is this is just an agreement.
Yeah. Instead of speculating, let's ask the guy that knows.
Oh, I mean, sorry, I spaced out for a second. What was the question?
No, you're fine. So does this improvement require a hard fork, or is it something that can be integrated as a gentleman's agreement?
It's an agreement. It's agreement that of how we're going to do it in the future, basically, or how we're going to interpret it in the future. It doesn't require a hard fork.
And so my understanding is that anyone could have used this field for this purpose before, but what we're doing is solidifying that this is how it's going to be used, so it can't get changed later. So someone won't build their smart contracts now and then find out in 6 months that that field use was changed and they're suddenly in big trouble.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's important that we come to agreement on one way to do it, basically, other than, like have a bunch of different ideas out there.
Does that essentially mean like when the PR, is it just going to be observed and kind of acknowledged? They used to do acknowledged, and then once it's integrated into the spec, then it is kind of considered set in stone for a while?
Yeah, roughly. So basically it's like it's in the spec, and when people are implementing the merge in their clients, the way they interpret like how withdrawals work will take into account that information. We're sort of like agreeing that that's how that's going to work.
Great, good. I'm glad we got that worked out here today.
Yeah, it's like it's a nuanced thing, because it's like kind of time travel-y. You're making like a commitment to work in the future when things happen and things are different. Yeah, that's the essence of it.
So
there's a good question. Yeah, we can cover this later.
Go ahead. Okay. So my assumption that the smart contract feature, I think let's call it feature, requires the Berlin hard fork is wrong, because if I remember correctly, Rocket Pool required the hard fork to continue the project. Am I wrong or am I correct?
I don't think they require. I don't think that this require. Don't see why this requires the Berlin hard fork.
I've been reading their literature all day, and what they say is they intend to release in Q1 when this functionality is available, and this is sort of, at least based on their public stuff, and we can learn more from Dave on Monday. This is the thing that they have been the only thing they've been hanging on, as far as I know.
Yeah, there may be something else that they need Berlin for. I'm actually not. I didn't know about it. If that's the case, I'm gonna have to catch up on that.
There was a good question in the chat by member DJ. He says, do we know of anyone having a true accidental slashing with a single machine? And to my knowledge, and I've been talking to lots of people following the slashings, we haven't found yet anyone claiming to be slashed for reasons that weren't public knowledge, like a faulty client or anything. It seems that all slashings were for setups that weren't done right, which is something I'm worried because it can happen that some client glitches and slashing happens, but so far that doesn't seem to be the case. We have to be very grateful that the client teams have done such a good job that so far nothing like that happened.
I love that Afri continually referred to this as the beacon chain candidate. And so since withdrawals are locked, since the funds are in one place, it is not difficult to roll back a client error at this point. And that's still fair to everybody, because in many ways, this is a candidate. It is not a live release. And I'm not suggesting that, I think that's going to happen or I want it to. I'm suggesting that there are fail safes in place if something goes really wonky. So.
We have another good question by Alexander Gravier. He says, what can software developers who want to help with ETH2 can do right now, if anything? Maybe not only stuff related to staking, but anything to help. And I can speak by myself and representing ETHStaker. ETHStaker is a community run by volunteers. We do everything we do, like putting together these events, because we want to spread the knowledge. And we can use some help by IT professionals that want to increase the impact of this mission of spreading knowledge. If you particularly are a software developer and you want to help, and I'm speaking to Alexander Gravier, but applies to everyone else, feel free to reach out to any of us, the ETHStaker staples, and we will find something for you to help with for sure.
Yeah, thanks, Patricia. We have these daily conversations where we say, hey, JCon just expressed interest. How can we plug him in? And then we look at what we have available and what the strengths are, and we work to get people plugged in. And so if you have effort or time to contribute, especially for me working on the Reddit, what I'm looking for are commenters who just come and take care of people. We have a lot of people who just come and pour their worries out. And if you can just be welcoming first and knowledgeable second and help take care of those people, even if it's 30 minutes a day, that in itself is a tremendous contribution. And if you have more, like Patricio said, please reach out to us, and we'll be glad to help you become a part of our growth.
We definitely had a success story with that, with JH. Do you want to talk about that, Hank?
So JH is, he kind of reached out and was like, he's Lecture Complex on Reddit, and was like, hey, I'm here, I have willing hands, what can I do? And that was when I was feeling buried in the collaboration groups. And so JH, his single job with ETHStaker is to assign those collaboration groups. And he spends a couple of hours a week doing it. And he's doing an awesome job, and we're glad to have him. And he is just plugged in really well. And so if you sign up for a collaboration group, the other ETHStakers, we may not even be aware of it, but in just a couple hours or days, you're going to find yourself assigned to a group of people who may become future friends. So yeah, that's a great story.
I have to admit that I don't know who JH is.
Yeah, because I mean, he's doing a job. He's Jared is his name, and I know that you've crossed paths with him a few times, but he's just somebody who's helping by doing a small job, which is an incredible benefit for all of us. So thank you, Jared.
I'm sure we want more people like him, so don't hesitate and reach out to us. We need help in so many different fields. There are initiatives that we want to run, and we just don't run because we got overworked. So don't hesitate for a minute.
And it could be in anything. For example, we just had the ETHStaker Community Quiz Show, and it was our second only quiz show, but we had 2 community members run that independently. Phil.eth and Colfax. So it doesn't have to necessarily be technical, roles either that we need to fill. If you are so inclined to help us in any way in any of our events, we have seats available and actively looking for sharing those opportunities with people.
Well, we are clicking on the hour.
Yeah. So thanks everyone for coming. Lakshman, we learned so much from you today. I'm really delighted that first that you wrote the article. That was the thing that I needed to solidify these comments or these concepts, and then that you joined us today. So thanks, Lakshman. Thanks to the ETHStaker crew for showing up and putting this together. And thanks to everyone who stopped by to join us today. I hope you print your POAP and paste it to your wall.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This was fun.
Bye. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.